The Montana winter bit harder than usual that night, driving even the wolves into their dens as bitter wind howled through the pines. Nathan Brooks stood at his cabin window, watching the storm rage against the mountainside with a steaming mug of coffee warming his calloused hands. 3 years of solitude had taught him to appreciate these moments of nature's fury. They reminded him he was still alive, still feeling, still part of something larger than himself. The flash came without warning, a brilliant streak of purple-white that split the night sky like lightning. But lightning didn't move sideways, and it certainly didn't leave trails of shimming debris in its wake. Nathan's military training kicked in immediately, his mind calculating trajectory and probable impact zone even as he was already pulling on his winter gear and medical kit. Whatever it was, it had gone down roughly 2 miles north of his position, in the deeper wilderness where the mountains grew teeth. If anyone was aboard that craft, and his gut told him there was, they'd need help fast in these temperatures. The rational part of his brain screamed that he should radio it in, let the proper authorities handle it. But 15 years as a combat medic had taught him that sometimes waiting for proper authorities meant waiting too long. He'd seen enough combat drops to recognize a controlled crash when he saw one. This wasn't some random meteor or satellite debris, this was a ship fighting its way to the ground. The question was, whose? The wind cut through his layers as he trudged through knee-deep snow, following the fading glow on the horizon. His leg ached where the shrapnel had torn through it years ago, but he pushed through the pain with practiced determination. Whatever awaited him in the darkness ahead, he'd face it with the same steady resolve that had kept him alive through 3 tours and countless missions. The crash site announced itself with the sharp scent of heated metal and disturbed earth. The object, definitely a craft of some kind, had carved a quarter-mile trench through the forest before coming to rest against a granite outcropping. It was like no aircraft Nathan had ever seen, its sleek silver hull unmarred despite the impact, its design more reminiscent of a sea creature than any human vehicle. "Hello," he called out, approaching cautiously with his medical kit ready. "I'm here to help." A section of the hull shifted, revealing an opening that definitely hadn't been there before. Steam hissed out into the frigid air, and in the dim purple light emanating from within, Nathan saw movement. A figure stumbled out, clearly disoriented, their movements jerky and pained. Nathan rushed forward just as they collapsed into the snow. Up close, he could see that while the figure was humanoid, they were definitely not human. Their skin had a faint silvery sheen, and delicate patterns that might have been tattoos or natural markings traced across their features. Long hair that seemed to shimmer between colors spilled across the snow. She, and Nathan was fairly certain it was a she, wore what appeared to be some kind of flight suit, torn in several places to reveal wounds that leaked iridescent fluid. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing pupils like liquid mercury that fixed on him with startling clarity. She spoke, her voice musical but the words completely foreign to his ears. When he didn't respond, she tried again in what sounded like a different language, then another. Nathan shook his head, then pointed to himself. "Nathan," he said clearly, then gestured to her with an questioning look. She seemed to understand, pressing a hand to her chest. "Alariel." The word carried a strange resonance, as if multiple tones were being spoken at once. Then she winced, clutching at a particularly nasty gash across her ribs. Nathan's medical training took over. "Okay, Alariel. I don't know if you can understand me, but you're hurt and it's freezing out here. We need to get you somewhere warm and treat these wounds." He mimed shivering and pointed toward the direction of his cabin. She studied him for a long moment, those mercurial eyes seeming to peer straight into his soul. Then she nodded, attempting to stand but stumbling immediately. Nathan caught her, noting with surprise that despite her height, she had to be at least 6 feet tall. She was surprisingly light in his arms. More lights appeared in the sky, helicopters, based on the sound. Someone else had noticed the crash. Alariel's grip on his arm tightened, and the fear in her eyes needed no translation. "Right," Nathan muttered. "Not friendly then." He made a quick decision, scooping her up in his arms. Hold on. I know these woods better than they do. As he carried her through the darkness, taking paths only locals would know, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed irrevocably. The woman in his arms was quite possibly the most important person ever to set foot on Earth, and for some reason, she was afraid of being found. Which meant that until he knew more, his job was to make sure that didn't happen. He'd left the military behind years ago, seeking peace in his mountain solitude. But as Alarielle's head rested against his shoulder, her breathing labored but steady, he realized that some duties transcended uniforms and borders. Even, apparently, planetary ones. The storm surged around them as Nathan made his way back to the cabin, using the weather as cover. Behind them, more helicopters appeared, their searchlights cutting through the snow like angry eyes. But Nathan knew every ridge and hollow of these mountains, and he had something worth protecting again. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive. Dawn broke over the Montana wilderness, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of rose and gold. Inside Nathan's cabin, the fire crackled steadily as he finished applying the last bandage to Alarielle's wounds. The iridescent blood had finally stopped flowing, and her color, though still silvery, seemed stronger than it had been during their harrowing escape through the storm. The night had been long, filled with the distant sounds of helicopters and what Nathan suspected were drones searching the crash site. He'd taken every precaution, blocking all light from the windows, using only the fireplace for heat, and engaging the signal jammers he'd installed during more paranoid days. Now, watching Alarielle sleep peacefully on his couch, he was grateful for that paranoia. She stirred, those remarkable mercury eyes opening to take in her surroundings. Nathan offered her a cup of water, which she studied curiously before taking a careful sip. Then her eyes widened, and she took several deep drinks. Good? Nathan asked, miming drinking and giving a thumbs up. Alarielle touched her throat, then pressed her hand against a small device near her collarbone that Nathan had assumed was jewelry. When she spoke again, her musical voice was overlaid with halting English. The translation matrix, it needed time to analyze your language patterns. Her accent was strange but understandable. Thank you, Nathan Brooks, for saving my life. Nathan sat back, trying to hide his surprise. You're welcome. Though I have to admit, I've got about 1,000 questions right now. As do I. She attempted to sit up, wincing slightly. But first, I must know, did any others track my descent? Besides your world's authorities? Not that I saw. The helicopters were definitely military, probably Air Force or some alphabet agency. They're still searching the crash site. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. You're running from something. Someone. Alarielle's expression darkened. My people, the Celestial Empire, span 12 star systems. We have brought peace and prosperity to countless worlds through diplomacy and technological exchange. But there are those who believe we should use our advancement to conquer rather than cooperate. Her hands clenched in her lap. My father, the Emperor, was assassinated 3 days ago. I was meant to be next. A coup, Nathan said, the pieces falling into place. You're not just a refugee. You're their rightful leader. I am. Her voice carried both pride and weariness. But I cannot lead if I am dead. My supporters urged me to flee while they gathered forces. Your Earth was chosen because it's unknown to my people, we've observed your world but made no contact. She met his eyes. Until now. Nathan ran a hand through his beard, processing the implications. Those aren't just government helicopters looking for you. The ones who tried to kill you, they'll have ways to track you. The crash damaged my ship's quantum beacon. They cannot trace me directly, but they will know I survived and will begin searching nearby systems. She touched her bandaged side. I need time to heal, to contact my allies. And I need to learn about your world, your people. If Earth becomes involved in our conflict, I must know what that means. Well, you're in luck. Nathan gestured to the cabin's isolation. I've got nothing but time, and there's no better place to hide than right here. Used to be a survival instructor before my combat tours, I can teach you what you need to know about Earth, starting with the basics. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Nathan taught Alarielle about human customs, technology, and history, while she shared stories of her own world. He showed her how to cook over a fire, how to move quietly through the woods, how to dress and act if they needed to venture into town for supplies. In return, she explained the principles behind her translation matrix, the political structure of her empire, and the wonders of worlds he'd never imagined. But it wasn't all survival training and cultural exchange. Nathan found himself captivated by her quick mind and genuine curiosity about everything Earth had to offer. She approached each new experience with a combination of royal dignity and childlike wonder that he found increasingly endearing. For her part, Alarielle seemed fascinated by his stories of Earth's military conflicts and peacekeeping missions, particularly his own experiences as a combat medic. Your people fight so differently from ours, she observed one evening as they sat by the fire. We have weapons that could vaporize entire continents, but we've grown almost too civilized to use them. Yet here you are, still fighting with boots on the ground, treating the wounded on both sides. Sometimes being too civilized can be dangerous, Nathan replied, stoking the fire. Makes it easy to forget the real cost of war when you wage it from orbit. Alarielle was quiet for a moment. Is that why you live here alone? Because you've seen too much of war's cost. Nathan felt the old familiar ache in his chest, not from any physical wound, but from memories of faces he couldn't save. Partly. After my last tour, I couldn't handle the noise, the crowds, the constant reminder of what we'd done and what we'd failed to do. Up here, things are simpler. Was simpler, he amended with a slight smile in her direction. She returned the smile, and Nathan felt something shift in his chest, something that had nothing to do with old wounds and everything to do with the way the firelight played across her otherworldly features. It was a dangerous feeling, one that had no place in their current situation. She was a princess, an empress, really, and he was just a broken soldier who'd helped her when she needed it. But when she reached across the space between them and laid her hand on his, her touch was warm and very real. Perhaps the universe has a sense of humor after all, she said softly. Sending me to the one human who could understand both duty and the price it demands. Before Nathan could respond, his perimeter alerts buzzed. Someone was approaching the cabin, multiple someones, based on the pattern of signals. Alarielle tensed, her hand going to the strange weapon she'd salvaged from her ship. Time to see if those hiding lessons paid off, Nathan said grimly, already moving to activate his backup plans. As he did, he couldn't help but wonder if he was protecting her out of duty, instinct, or something far more complicated that grew stronger with each passing day. The answer, he suspected, wouldn't matter much to whoever was about to come through his door. Nathan's training kicked in automatically as he doused the fire. Years of combat experience guided his movements with practiced efficiency. There's a hidden cellar, he whispered to Alarielle. Behind the bookcase. No, she interrupted, her mercury eyes gleaming in the darkness. I will not hide while you face danger on my behalf. She pulled something from her belt, a small silver sphere that hummed faintly. Besides, I can tell by their energy signatures that these are not your Earth's military forces. A chill ran down Nathan's spine. Your people found us already. A tracking team. Elite assassins. Her voice was grim. They must have detected my emergency beacon when I tried to contact my allies. She pressed the sphere into his hand. This is a shield generator. It will stop their energy weapons. Nathan weighted the sphere in his palm, noting how it seemed to pulse in sync with his heartbeat. How many? 5, maybe 6. They'll try to take me alive, the usurpers want a public execution to cement their power. She moved to the window, her movements liquid and precise despite her injuries. We have perhaps 2 minutes before they reach the cabin. Nathan's mind raced through options. The cabin's defenses were meant to deter curious hikers and overzealous government agents, not alien assassins. But he knew these woods better than anyone, and night was falling. We need to split them up, he said, already moving to his gun safe. Use the terrain against them. Alarielle nodded, understanding immediately. The storm is building again. We can use it for cover. Nathan pulled out his old M4 carbine and a hunting rifle, quickly checking both. He doubted Earth weapons would do much against advanced alien armor, but they might provide a useful distraction. There's an old mine system about a mile north. Lots of narrow tunnels, multiple exits. If we can get there. A high-pitched whine cut through the air, and something hit the cabin with enough force to rattle the windows. The walls began to glow with a sickly purple light. They're trying to disable your technology first, Alarielle explained, her voice tight. Standard protocol for a capture operation. Another blast hit, and every electronic device in the cabin went dead. But Nathan was already moving, grabbing his pre-packed bug-out bag and tossing Alarielle a set of winter gear. Your shield's still working. She checked the device at her hip. Yes. Their dampening field only affects primitive technology. Primitive. Right. Nathan allowed himself a grim smile as he pulled on his snow gear. Let's see how their advanced technology handles good old-fashioned guerrilla warfare. They slipped out through a hidden back exit just as the front door exploded inward. Nathan caught a glimpse of tall, armored figures moving with inhuman grace, their faceplates glowing with the same purple light that had disabled his equipment. Then they were running through the snow, using the trees for cover as energy bolts sizzled through the air around them. Alarielle moved with surprising speed despite her injuries, matching Nathan stride for stride. He led them through the densest part of the forest, where the thick pines would make it difficult for their pursuers to maintain formation. The storm was picking up, just as he'd hoped, reducing visibility and masking their tracks. They're splitting up, Alarielle whispered as they paused behind a massive fallen tree. 3 following directly, 2 circling to cut us off. Nathan nodded, pulling a handful of small objects from his pack. How good is their armor against concussive force? Her mercury eyes widened slightly as she recognized the grenades. Even our armor has weak points at the joints. But the explosion will give away our position. That's the idea. Nathan pulled the pin on one grenade and threw it far to their left, then immediately led them right. The explosion sent snow and debris flying, and he heard alien voices calling out in a language that made his teeth ache. They reached the mine entrance just as the storm hit full force. Nathan had maintained this old entrance for years, reinforcing the timbers and keeping it clear of debris, though he'd never imagined he'd be using it to escape alien assassins. He led Alarielle inside, activating chemical light sticks to illuminate their way. They'll be more vulnerable in here, Alarielle said as they moved deeper into the tunnel system. Their sensors will be confused by the mineral deposits, and their armor will restrict their movement in the narrow spaces. That's what I'm counting on. Nathan checked the shield generator, which still hummed steadily. Time to show them why humans never completely abandoned primitive combat techniques. What followed was a deadly game of cat and mouse through the dark tunnels. Nathan used every trick he'd learned in urban combat, setting traps with remaining grenades, using the acoustics of the caves to mislead their pursuers, and forcing the armored assassins into tight spaces where their advanced technology became a hindrance rather than an advantage. One by one, they whittled down their pursuers. A well-placed grenade caught 2 of them in a narrow passage. Another fell into a hastily dug pit, their armor locking up from the impact. The 4th was separated from their group and lost in the maze of tunnels. But the leader was smarter, more cautious. They tracked Nathan and Alarielle to one of the larger chambers, where several tunnels converged. As they tried to cross to another exit, a blast of energy cut off their path. The assassin emerged from one of the tunnels, their armor more elaborate than the others, crackling with purple energy. When they spoke, the translation matrix rendered their words in cold, clipped tones. Most impressive, Your Highness. I see why the Emperor favored you above your cousins. But this primitive world cannot hide you forever. Alarielle stepped forward, her bearing every inch the royal she was despite her scuffed winter gear and dirt-streaked face. You disgrace everything my father built. The Empire was meant to uplift worlds, not conquer them. The Empire was meant to rule. The assassin raised their weapon. Your father was weak. Just as you are weak, hiding behind this human primitive. Nathan had been slowly moving into position during the exchange. Now, as the assassin's attention was focused on Alarielle, he saw his chance. He threw his last grenade, not at the assassin, but at the chamber's ceiling above them. The explosion brought down tons of rock and snow. Nathan grabbed Alarielle and pulled her into one of the side tunnels as the chamber collapsed, burying their pursuer under the mountain itself. They emerged from a different exit half a mile away, into a night made white by the howling storm. Only when they were sure they weren't being followed did they stop to rest, finding shelter in a small cave Nathan used as one of his emergency caches. As they huddled together for warmth, Alarielle touched the shield generator still humming at Nathan's hip. You adapted to fighting my people's technology remarkably quickly. Nathan shrugged, trying to ignore how aware he was of her proximity. Technology changes, but the basics of combat don't. Cover, concealment, using the environment to your advantage. Your assassins were too reliant on their advanced weapons. They forgot that sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Perhaps that is why I was brought here, she said softly. Not just to hide, but to learn. My people have grown too dependent on our advancement. We've forgotten what it means to truly fight for what we believe in. Nathan looked at her, seeing not just the alien princess now, but a leader beginning to understand what it would take to save her people. We should move soon. There might be more coming. Alarielle nodded, but before she pulled away, she pressed her hand to his chest, right above his heart. Thank you, Nathan Brooks. Not just for saving my life again, but for teaching me what real strength looks like. The gesture felt more intimate than any kiss, and Nathan found himself fighting emotions he couldn't afford to feel. Because now that they'd engaged directly with her pursuers, everything would change. The conflict they'd been hiding from would find them, one way or another. And when it did, Nathan knew he would have to decide where his true duty lay, to his world, or to the remarkable woman who had fallen from the stars and into his life. The safe house was little more than a concrete bunker buried in the mountainside, but after 3 days of constant movement through the wilderness, it felt like luxury. Nathan watched as Alarielle bent over the complex communications device she'd salvaged from her ship, her silver hair falling forward to obscure her face. They'd been here for hours while she attempted to make contact with her allies, and the tension in her shoulders told him she was close to a breakthrough. Suddenly, the device hummed to life, projecting a holographic display that filled the small room with shifting patterns of light. Alarielle's hands moved through the projection, manipulating symbols Nathan couldn't begin to understand. Then a voice spoke, not through the translation matrix, but in her native tongue, its harmonics making the air itself seem to vibrate. Alarielle responded rapidly, her own voice taking on that multitone quality that reminded Nathan she wasn't human, no matter how easy it had become to forget that fact. He watched her expression shift from hope to shock, then to something that looked like fierce joy. When she finally turned to him, her mercury eyes were bright with unshed tears. They did it, she said, her voice thick with emotion. My supporters, they've retaken the capital. The usurper's forces are in retreat. My father's murderers are being brought to justice. Nathan felt a complex mix of emotions, joy at her victory, pride in her people's success, and a growing hollowness in his chest that he tried to ignore. That's wonderful news. Your people need you. They do. She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could see the subtle patterns that shifted beneath her silvery skin. A ship is already on its way. They'll be here within 2 of your Earth days. 2 days. Nathan nodded, turning to check their supplies, needing something to do with his hands. We'll need to be careful about the pickup location. After that fight with the assassins, every government agency in the country will be looking for unusual activity. Nathan. Her hand on his arm stopped him, turned him back to face her. Come with me. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and impossibility. Nathan stared at her, seeing the earnestness in her expression, the hope and fear warring in those alien eyes. I can't, he said finally, the words feeling like gravel in his throat. Your people need their leader focused on rebuilding, on healing the wounds this civil war has caused. They don't need the distraction of their empress bringing home a primitive human soldier. Is that what you think you are? Alarielle's voice was sharp now, angry in a way he'd never heard before. A primitive? A distraction? You, who taught me more about true leadership in these few weeks than all my tutors in a lifetime. She began pacing the small space, her movements swift and agitated. Do you know what I learned, hiding here on your primitive world? I learned that advancement without wisdom is meaningless. I watched you fight elite warriors with nothing but courage and cleverness. I saw how you help everyone who crosses your path, even while hiding from society yourself. You showed me that true strength isn't in our weapons or our technology, but in how we choose to use them. Nathan felt his carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. Alarielle. My father believed that the greatest power of the Empire was not in our fleets or our science, but in our ability to learn from other worlds, other peoples. She stopped in front of him, reaching up to touch his face. He would have loved you, I think. A warrior who heals, a protector who understands the cost of violence. You're exactly what my people need to remember who we're meant to be. And what about what you need? Nathan asked softly, allowing himself to lean slightly into her touch. What I need? A smile played at the corners of her mouth. I need someone who sees me as more than just a symbol or a prize to be won. Someone who challenges me, teaches me, makes me laugh even when my world is falling apart. Someone who looks at an alien princess crash landing in his backyard and thinks first of helping her, not exploiting her. Nathan caught her hand in his, marveling at how natural it felt despite its alien warmth. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple at all, she admitted. There will be opposition. Questions. Some will say I'm diminishing myself, others that I'm elevating you above your station. The political complications alone will be enormous. Her smile widened. But I am the Empress. And if I cannot choose my own path, then what was the point of fighting for my throne at all? Nathan looked down at their joined hands, hers silvery and elegant, his rough and scarred. I'm not good with politics. Or crowds. Or fancy ceremonies, which I'm guessing your people have a lot of. True. You're terrible at protocol, you're stubbornly independent, and you have a shocking disregard for proper etiquette. Her free hand came up to join the first, framing his face. You're also brave, and kind, and wise in ways my people have forgotten how to be. I don't want you for your political skills. I want you because you make me better. Because you remind me what it means to lead with both strength and compassion. The walls crumbled completely. Nathan pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers in a gesture that had become natural between them. 2 days, you said. Yes. Her breath mingled with his. Time enough to plan our approach. And to contact certain progressive members of the Council who might support the idea of establishing closer relations with Earth. After all, if we're going to scandalize the Empire, we might as well make it count for something. Nathan couldn't help but laugh. Already thinking like an empress. Always. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. But I'm thinking like a woman, too. One who knows what she wants and isn't afraid to fight for it. The kiss, when it came, felt both inevitable and impossible, like touching a star and finding it warm instead of burning. Nathan knew there would be challenges ahead, politics and prejudices and cultural gaps wider than the space between their worlds. But as Alarielle's lips moved against his, as her impossible warmth filled all the cold spaces in his soul, he realized that some choices weren't really choices at all. Sometimes duty and desire pointed to the same star. Sometimes the bravest thing you could do was let yourself believe in impossible things. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe had a way of bringing exactly what you needed right to your doorstep. Even if it did crash land in the snow first. Sunrise painted the mountain peaks in shades of amber and rose as Nathan and Alarielle stood at the edge of a high plateau. Far below, a contingent of black government vehicles wound their way up the access road like a line of ants. Above, the morning sky remained clear and blue, for now. Your people will be here soon. Nathan checked his watch, a habit born of military precision rather than necessity. They both knew exactly when the ship would arrive. Yes. Alarielle's hand found his, her touch warm despite the mountain chill. The timing must be precise. We need Earth's authorities to witness this, but we can't give them time to respond with military force. The past 48 hours had been a whirlwind of preparation. Using the communication device, Alarielle had made contact with key members of her government, laying the groundwork for what they were about to attempt. Nathan had reached out to old military contacts, sending carefully worded messages that would bring the right people to this location at the right time. It was a gamble, but as Alarielle had pointed out, they were already playing for the highest stakes imaginable. The future of Earth-Empire relations would be decided in the next few minutes, one way or another. The first vehicles reached the plateau, and Nathan recognized the mix of agencies present: FBI, CIA, military intelligence. Good. These were people who could think beyond protocol when necessary, who understood the bigger picture. Ready? He asked, squeezing Alarielle's hand. She squared her shoulders, every inch the empress she was born to be. Ready. They walked forward together as officials poured from their vehicles, weapons drawn but not yet aimed. Nathan raised his hands slowly, pitching his voice to carry across the plateau. My name is Nathan Brooks, former Army combat medic. I'm here with Her Imperial Majesty, Empress Alarielle of the Celestial Empire. We are here to establish peaceful first contact between Earth and the Empire. A familiar figure stepped forward, Colonel Richard Martinez, Nathan's former commanding officer. Brooks? We've been looking for you since that crash. What the hell is going on? Before Nathan could respond, the sky changed. The blue deepened to violet, then split apart as a ship larger than anything Earth had ever built descended through the atmosphere. It was beautiful in its alienness, all flowing lines and impossible angles, gleaming like liquid starlight. Every weapon on the plateau snapped up, but Alarielle was already moving. Her voice carried across the space with that multi-toned resonance that marked her as not human. Hold your fire. We come in peace, and with an opportunity. She gestured to the ship, which had halted its descent, hovering silently above them. Your world stands on the brink of a new era. The Celestial Empire offers friendship, cultural exchange, and technological cooperation. Why should we trust you? Martinez called out, though Nathan noticed he'd already signaled his men to lower their weapons. Because I chose one of your own as my consort. Alarielle's mercury eyes flashed. Nathan Brooks saved my life, protected me from assassins, and showed me the very best of what humanity has to offer. He proved that Earth is ready for contact with the wider galaxy. A beam of light shot down from the ship, resolving into a group of figures that made the Earth officials step back in awe. They were similar to Alarielle in their alien beauty, dressed in flowing robes that seemed to capture starlight. Their leader stepped forward and bowed deeply to Alarielle. Your Majesty. The capital is secured, and the council awaits your return. He turned to Nathan, offering another bow. And we welcome you, Nathan Brooks of Earth. The Empress has told us of your bravery and wisdom. Nathan returned the bow, grateful for Alarielle's lessons in Imperial protocol. I'm honored. But right now, we have more immediate concerns. He turned to Martinez, who was watching the exchange with rapidly calculating eyes. Colonel, you have a choice to make. What happens in the next few minutes will determine Earth's relationship with the Empire for generations to come. Martinez studied him for a long moment, then glanced at the ship hovering above them. You vouch for them, Brooks? For her. With my life, sir. Nathan met his former commander's gaze steadily. This is our chance to do things right. No hidden agendas, no power plays. Just an honest offer of friendship from a civilization that's learned the hard way that conquest isn't the answer. After what felt like an eternity, Martinez nodded. I'll need to make some calls. But I think we can arrange a proper diplomatic reception. Maybe keep this quiet until we've worked out the details. The tension on the plateau eased noticeably. Alarielle stepped forward, every movement graceful and measured. We would be honored to work with your governments to establish proper diplomatic channels. The Empire has considerable experience in helping worlds transition to galactic citizenship. What followed was a blur of activity, calls made, arrangements secured, preliminary protocols established. Through it all, Nathan watched in amazement as Alarielle demonstrated why she was born to lead, deftly handling concerns and smoothing ruffled feathers on both sides. Finally, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, she turned to him with a smile that still made his heart skip. Ready to see the stars, my love? Nathan looked around at the plateau where his world had changed forever. The mountain peaks that had been his refuge now seemed like stepping stones to something greater. Lead the way, Your Majesty. They walked together toward the beam of light, hand in hand. Behind them, Earth's officials were already planning how to announce humanity's entry onto the galactic stage. Above them, the ship waited to carry them to adventures Nathan could hardly imagine. You know, he said as they stepped into the light, when I built that cabin, I was looking for a place to hide from the world. Alarielle's laugh was like music. And instead, you found all the worlds there are. The light enveloped them, lifting them toward their future. Nathan felt no fear, no doubt. He had found something worth reaching for, something bigger than himself or his past wounds. In saving Alarielle, he had saved himself, and in loving her, he would help bridge the gap between their peoples. As they materialized aboard the ship, Nathan caught his first glimpse of Earth from above, a blue jewel suspended in infinite black. It looked both fragile and precious, like all the best things in life. Beautiful, isn't it? Alarielle whispered, squeezing his hand. Yes, he replied, but he was looking at her, at the way starlight played across her features and at the future he saw in her eyes. It really is. The ship's engines hummed to life, and Earth fell away below them as they ascended into legend. They had challenges ahead, political intrigue, cultural barriers, the enormous task of introducing two civilizations. But they would face it all together, the soldier and his empress, united by a love that transcended the very stars themselves. Sometimes the greatest journeys begin with a crash landing. Sometimes the longest roads lead exactly where you need to be. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you find that home isn't a place at all, it's a person who fills your heart with starlight and makes every impossible thing seem possible. The end.